Okay, everyone. I promised one of your classmates that I would try to help her with her quiz review since she actually missed class today. And just because I was pressed on time, I went ahead and decided I would do about half of your review worksheet. So this nonetheless should help you. There's a few questions I need to ask you, however, because since I'm not your normal IM3 teacher, here is what I would definitely want you to consider. First of all, since we're trying to solve these trig functions here, ultimately that's the goal, please ask your teacher if he or she wants the answers in degrees or radians. Okay? And you have to learn to set your calculator to whichever is preferred. Now, I know most likely your teacher wants degrees, and here's why. If you look at the directions, see how theta is supposed to go from 0 to 360. You guys hopefully recognize 360 is a full circle, right? 360 degrees in a circle. So that's what I'm going to run with. I'm going to do degrees. Okay? But anyways, the first thing in this review you were asked to do was to convert degrees into radians. So how do I know this number right here, for example, is in radians? You got to recognize whenever there's a pi in there, you know it is in radians. That's a dead giveaway. Okay? Well, how do you convert basically radians into degrees? The directions are actually backwards and wrong. We're given radians, we want degrees. So how are we going to do that? Well, the conversion factor is there's 180 degrees in pi radians. And notice I did 180 over pi instead of pi over 180. Why? Because I want to cancel out my pi radians. You see? So now that pi is canceled out, I have 17 times 180 over 6. You should be allowed to use a calculator, but 180, you see, divided by 6 is 30. And so really the problem is 17 times 30, which is, I'm pretty sure, 520. See, 3 times, actually 510, right? Let me verify that. We'll just do it old school here. 17 times 3. 3 times 7, 21. Sorry, guys, I'm a little tired. So 17 times 30 is 510 degrees. Now, what the heck does 510 degrees mean, though, is don't forget, if I do a full circle, that's 360. So a 510 means I did a full circle and then went around some more. If your teacher ever asks you that, by the way, just subtract 360. You're basically taking away one of the loops. And let's see what I end up with. 0, 11 minus 6 is 5. So 150. So a 510 degree angle is basically a full loop. Let me start over here. So if you needed to know what 510 really meant again, you would do a full loop, because that would be 360, and then you would go another 150. So you would be over here with basically 30 degrees as your reference angle. Okay? But you would go a 360 plus another 150. Okay, that's probably more than you needed to know, but that's good to know. All right, let's try another one. Again, notice it is in radians already because of the pi. So I'm going to use 180 over pi. Why? Because I know the pi's will cancel out. Notice I have negative 2 times 180 over 3. Reducing or dividing 180 by 3 is 60. So negative 2 times 60 means my angle is negative 120 degrees. Now, it's important again to know what that means. Even though the teacher may not have asked you yet, he or she eventually will. What does a negative 120 mean? Negative 120 means you rotate clockwise in the opposite direction here. And I'm going to end up basically somewhere about right here. This is my negative 120 degree. Also, if you think about it this way, I could have done 360 minus 120 and know going in the positive way, you would get a positive 240 degrees. So 240 is equivalent, you see, to negative 120. So let's actually get to the problems. Okay, guys, I'm going to skip this one for a good reason, as you'll find out at the end, number 3. But I just picked some of the odds. So check out number 5 here. How am I going to solve this? The trick is always get your trig function by itself. Okay, so first thing though I can do is notice how we have fractions of fourths in here. So why don't we times everything by 4 and use the distributive property? So when I do this, the 4 cancels out. I'm left with negative 20 plus square root of 3. When I do 4 times negative 5, I have an equals, first of all, in between. But I'd have a negative 20. And then finally, 4 times negative 1/4 would be a negative 1 when that 4 cancels out, right? So negative 1 tangent theta. Now what? Well, did you notice I could add 20 to both sides? And now I'm left with square root of 3 equal to negative 1 tangent theta. So dividing by negative 1, tangent theta equals negative square root of 3. From here, you should know I'm going to do a tangent inverse to find my angle theta, right? So let's take a look at the calculator here. Here we go. Hopefully that's large enough for you to see through my writing. But notice, negative square root of 3, of course, is negative 1.732. And hopefully you can see, let me adjust it a little bit more here. But notice I did, guys, the tangent inverse on the answer negative 1.73, i.e. negative square root of 3. And there is my answer, negative 60 degrees. Okay, now here's the key thing, guys. With these trig functions, you're going to have generally 2 answers. I know theta, for example, is negative 60 degrees. But wait a minute here. Don't we also understand, and I hope you watched my previous video, but tangent is negative in the second quadrant as well as in the fourth quadrant, right? So we already have the negative 60 degrees here. We're missing the second quadrant one. So how do we figure that out? It's actually quite simple. We make our reference angle of 60 degrees right here. Remember, you always reference it with the x-axis right here. Well, if I do 60 this way, guys, doesn't that mean the angle is actually 120? All you had to really do is take 180 minus 60, and you know the second quadrant angle that answers our question is 120 degrees. So therefore, our answers are negative 60 degrees, but also 120 degrees. All right, pause the video if you need to. Okay, here's number 7. Again, our goal is to find a way to get our trig function by itself. Here's my sine theta over here. What could I do first? Well, why don't we minus 2 both sides? We now have 2 square root of 3 equal to negative 4 sine theta. Now all I need to do is divide by negative 4. So I know sine theta must be 2 square root of 3 divided by negative 4. I'm going to put this in my calculator, and then I'm going to do sine inverse, right? Because sine inverse of this is going to give me my theta. So let's see what my theta is going to be. If we enlarge my calculator screen here a little bit, hopefully that's large enough for you to see. Notice that 2 square root of 3 divided by negative 4 is negative 0.866, and so on. We do the sine inverse on that answer. We got, again, negative 60 degrees for theta. But now, guys, let's think again. Look over here to the right side. We know that sine is positive in the first quadrant, right? Our answer, notice sine was a negative. Look at the calculator screen there. So we know sine is negative where? Remember, sine goes with y. So sine is negative in the fourth quadrant and in the third quadrant, right? Well, like the previous problem, we already got the negative 60 degree angle here. So the fourth quadrant answer is already found. Where is the other 60 degree angle? We again just imagine that we have a reference angle of 60 degrees. Remember, this right here is actually 180 degrees. So in this case, I'm going below 180 here. So 180 plus 60 means the angle right in here, guys, has got to be 240 degrees. Pause the video if you need to. Now, the last one I'm going to do, the one I skipped, guys, was number 3. And this is the one you better discuss with your teacher right before you get the quiz, okay? Make sure your teacher is aware that he or she gave you a problem that you can't solve. And maybe that was one of the things he or she's testing you on. But notice, guys, if I try to solve this one, watch this. I'm going to times everything by 3. Using the distributive property, 3 cancels out, right? So negative 3 minus 2 square root of 3 equals, here when I times by 3, I have negative 3. Here when I times by 3, I have 3 cosine of theta. Now I can solve for cosine if I first add 3 to both sides. So negative 3 is gone. And the only thing left to do now is divide by 3, both sides. Once that 3 is gone, do you agree? Cosine of theta equals negative 2 square root of 3 over 3. This number, as you can see in my calculator screen here, is a negative 1.154. And hopefully you realize that cosine or sine can never be bigger than 1 or negative 1. Okay? If you didn't know that, once you do cosine inverse, you would realize something is wrong. See how I got an error? Why did I get an error? Because you can't solve it. So this one, guys, has no solution. We could not solve it. Okay? You cannot have a cosine or sine bigger than 1 or, let's just say, smaller than negative 1. It's always got to be between a negative 1 and a positive 1 value, okay? That's why we got the error on this problem number 3. That's why there's no solution. This is definitely one problem you need to discuss with your teacher before you take your quiz, okay? So anyways, guys, hopefully this video helps. I probably put in more information than you need. So maybe you watch it more than once. If you have any questions, even though I don't teach most of you, please come and talk to me about it, guys. I want to make sure you're successful, okay? So I'll see you around.